I can't possibly describe how painful the last 11 months have been for myself, my wife, and my son, Frankie Jr. Our family, including Shannon and her children and our grandchildren, have been ridiculed, demeaned, slandered, mocked in the most vicious ways you can imagine.
Every morning just crying, thinking this is not going to be what's going to happen every single day. It's just so hard to get through it.
From a purely human perspective, it physically hurts me to know that there are people out there willing to use the name of a family annihilator in such an exploitative way. Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 in my series about the Watts family tragedy. If you haven't seen my part 1 yet, I encourage you to do so. You can find the link in the description below. Because in part 1, I outlined the case itself and introduced the idea of Watts Island. And as I started to do research for part 2, I realized I didn't need a part 3. So today's part 2 is about how creators on Watts Island directly engaged with either the Watts or the Rzucek families, and what I witnessed those families go through just because they were related to Chris and Shanann. Part 3 will be about the creator on creator mishigas that started as a result. It kind of drilled down from Watts' case into Watts Island, which is just a bunch of creator on creator drama, and sometimes the subs as well. But the worst part of all of this, in all honesty, and that's what my channel is about, is that it all happened on the backs of Shanann's loved ones, and Chris's too. So I'm going to start by showing you the state of mind that the Watts and the Rzucek families were in just after Chris went to prison, right around at that time. And, because Cindy Watts gave an interview where you can see her visibly struggling to cope with the trauma. And Frank Rzucek actually flew to Colorado to stand from North Carolina to stand in front of the Watts house to beg social media not to keep posing crazy conspiracy theories, because it already had started about that time. So let's look at those clips.
I want Chris to have his day in court. I need to know. I'd feel wonderful if I could talk to him and he could tell me what happened. And then we can all go on. But if he didn't do it, if he did not do this, then I need somebody to defend him. He just I don't think he just had the right person at his side. I don't. That relationship was toxic from the very beginning.
Anyone seeing that clip of Cindy Watts would feel compassion for her, would feel an understanding that she's going through an immensely hard time, and would want to help her, right? And people did, and they reached out to her. Now let's see the Rzucek family.
What do you say to yourself about that?
There's many times that I just feel like giving up. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here.
Again, anyone seeing that would want to swoop in and help protect them from being harmed again by anyone online, or by just getting the story shoved down their throats every day. And people did. They swooped into the Rzucek's lives as well. They were both clearly very raw, very traumatized in different ways, and the Rzuceks wanted it all to go away, very understandably, right? The Watts wanted to keep fighting to get their son out of prison. And in these recordings between Chris and his mom, you can tell where her mind is at. And you can see how desperate she is for him to fight. Watch this.
This nightmare has to be over for everybody.
No. You have to remember, we're strong.
I know. This is my decision, though.
But don't ever confess to something you didn't do.
I know, but this is my decision, though. This is all me, okay?
Now, when people express vulnerability, any person, not just people involved in a murder case, when people express vulnerability, two types of people are likely to feel compelled to reach out and help those families. One type of person truly wants to help alleviate the pain in any way they can. They come with that full energy of, I want to help you. The other type sees it as an opportunity for content on their social media channel. But to make things more difficult, the predators, the ones that are not going in with good intentions, are not obviously not going to walk up to the Watts or the Rzuceks and say, "Hi, I'm a predator," or "Hi, I want to exploit your case." They're going to appear like a person who really truly wants to help. And it's very hard, especially when you're in a very vulnerable place, to understand the difference between the true intention and the not true intention until things start to fall out as time goes on. These kinds of predators that I just talked about, they preyed hard on the Watts and the Rzuceks. Now, the primary driver exploitation was the fact that YouTubers felt entitled for information and answers that they were never going to get. So there was never going to be closure in this situation. You know, even if the real reason that the YouTuber was constantly covering the Watts case was to get information or to get answers, that's impossible. There aren't going to ever be any answers, but they still twirled around in that environment of, we need to get answers, we need to scrape the discovery for answers, right? And that's especially true on the pro-Chris side. On the pro-Chris side, there were major discussions with extremely long live streams pouring through the discovery to find holes. Every time they ran into a perceived pinhole in the discovery, it became a feeding frenzy of conspiracy theories about that pinhole. And as the pro-Chris side of YouTube started kicking up more of this dust, the pro-Shanann side really wanted to resist it all on behalf of the Rzuceks by bashing any creator who continued to talk about the case. On both sides, there were very reasonable creators who came with the right intention and were able to stick to the facts and defend things on a factual basis. But on both sides as well, there were creators who were willing to hit well below the belt, not only against the family, but against any creators who disagreed with their theory of the case. Both sides had a segment of people who were willing to go as low as possible to prove that they were right, up to and including villainizing and mocking Shanann.
I believe Chris Watts committed these murders. I just think that he was an abused husband. So I've spent 2 years and a couple months wondering why Shanann Watts gets a pass for being an abusive wife.
Let me show you this clip from somebody who created an actual character out of Shanann's death.
Hey guys, it's me, Shazam. It's Friday night. I'm just getting ready for my Tinder date. Me and Chris decided that we're gonna do this whole open marriage thing. Hey Sharon, oh my god. Hey, I know somebody reported the cream of some young guy. I can't even believe it. It must have been that shitty of a guy.
On many channels, NK became the scapegoat, and the mysteries surrounding her burst something akin to a subgenre of the Watts case. I can't count how many times creators have come out and just drag Nicole Kessinger as if they knew exactly the kind of person she was, when she's actually a mystery to most of us. Now, this feeding frenzy was fueled by the knowledge that the Watts family was bound and determined to get Chris out of prison, and was accepting help from social media to do that. And of course, Algo Man, I call him Algo Man, Algo Man, the algorithm came along and helped that as well, because they saw that there was a lot of drama and conflict going on. That gets more attention, it keeps viewers on longer, so boom, the Watts case already had a lot of views. Now the drama out of the Watts case was also getting a lot of views. And it's addicting for certain people to keep trying to chase that number of views every single time. So social media played a very big role in this, and that's my role, is to try to help you understand that. Now, how does one go about using social media to get a murderer out of prison? You create conspiracy theories out of holes in the discovery. You do recreations of the murderer that support your theory of the case, or you go to extraordinary lengths to create another reason to tune in, right? This put the Watts case on the front page of True Crime YouTube for months, and that invisible character, like I said, that I call Algo Man, loved it. Algo Man flew around making sure we saw all the drama and all the controversy surrounding each new claim. But for every claim one side would make, the other side would dispute it. sometimes through heated and loud arguments that lasted for weeks on end. Before I get any further, I want to let you all know that I know a lot of people who are watching this know the creators that I'm speaking of when I say one thing or another, but I'm not going to name them by name here. And there's a few very, I believe, reasonable reasons for that. One is that a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about are still happening to this day. And I don't want to add more fuel to that fire. What I want to do is use the actions, use the behavior as an example of what is troubling and problematic, not the actual people. Because the minute you start to bring in actual channel names and creator names and subscriber names, rationality flies out the window, and whoever side you're on, you might stop listening to me. And obviously people can click me off as soon as they want. That's up to them. But what I'm trying to say is that the larger problem of how social media does this to communities will not be solved or understood if we keep pinning it on certain people. And in my view, behaviors are more important to talk about than people, because these behaviors can be matched up across multiple people, and you can start to see, oh, this is a behavior. It's also a behavioral pattern that I want to avoid, regardless of whether that individual person is somebody that you have supported or vouched for. So I landed on Watts Island in last March when all of this was just beginning to heat up, and I'd been following the Watts case since the day Shanann Watts was declared missing, and the girls, and continued to watch the channels on YouTube that talked about the Watts case, especially during COVID. I'm one of those COVID people, right? I was homebound along with the rest of the world and trying to decide whether I wanted to launch my own YouTube channel. I'd been thinking about launching a YouTube channel well before COVID, but now I had more time to think about it, right? So honestly, it appears that everyone in the world had the same idea. And I'll tell you a cute little story. I was talking to a friend of mine, a former Googler. We're both Zooglers, ex-Zooglers, that's what they call us. And he was pretty high up at Google. And, you know, I went to him a while back and I'm like, so I don't know if you know, but I'm a YouTuber now. And he's like, yeah, so is the entire world. So that's the way Google views. You can bet a lot of people in Google view YouTubers is that everybody's a YouTuber now. And so I think that they're overwhelmed with the amount of content that's being created and overwhelmed with managing their own and managing and enforcing their own terms of service. So that's just a little side story. But when I first threw my hat in the Watts ring and the true crime ring, I was like the average YouTuber who, you know, and I'm sure a lot of you are these average YouTubers who never had participated in a live chat, had watched everything from afar as an outsider. So these various feuding factions were totally unknown to me until I started to participate in the live chat, and I started to recognize that in the live chat there is this dynamic of people supporting the creator, and then if they go to a different channel and support a different creator, that creates acrimony, and the subscribers that are loyal to one or the other feel torn between one or the other. And this happens on a weekly basis where there are subscribers or mods or breaks in partnerships between creators, and then everybody feels like they have to choose, and so then the creator goes out and creates a big controversy about the person they're against so that the subs will stay with them and not go with them. It's constant. It's a constant thing, at least on Watts Island, and in my view it's constant everywhere, but it's particularly pernicious on Watts Island and with true crime because we're dealing with people who are going through the worst part of their entire lives. Right? We're meeting these people that we're talking about just as they're going through the worst thing in their entire lives, either being accused of murder or, you know, their family or friend missing or murdered. And then we come in saying, oh, we're going to help you. We're going to help you. And then it just becomes a shit show of missed connections and missed opportunities and resentments and fallouts, and the drama becomes more important than the crime itself. And I think that is a travesty. Now, even though I said I'm not going to mention the name of these channels, and I'm sorry to disappoint you if that's the case, but it just does not work to do that on YouTube if you want to teach about the lessons of their behaviors, okay? But I am going to describe what a few of these channels put the Watts and Rzucek families through, because that's what's most important to me. And as you listen to these accounts, rather than trying to figure out who I'm talking about, I humbly ask you, the viewer, to see this through the eyes of Chris and Shanann, or the Chris and Shanann's family's eyes, the people who are hurting the most in the situation, and her family, but especially Shanann, because she's not here to speak for herself, and she is, and her kids are the ultimate victims here, okay? Now, one of the biggest watched channels at the time that I came around, that was going live on a daily basis to make a big hairy deal out of every little thing, and their latest finding in the discovery. When I came around, this channel spent weeks and weeks analyzing the same few seconds of surveillance footage from Chris Watts' driveway when he was, we assume, putting the bodies in the car.
No, oh dear. Right. If you've seen from the first two parts, the shadow is moving. It's not a stationary thing. It's a human walking towards him. He bends down and picks it up and puts it in the cab. I'm not going to beat around the bush. That's what I think happens. That's my opinion, because he was already to the right. The shadow comes from the left and they meet. He bends down, picks it up, as you see, and puts it in the cab. That's what I think happened.
And as this footage continued to get torn through, one day Chris was alone. Another day NK was definitely there. Another day he was picking up a running Cece who was running toward him.
Is this what's picking up a small child? As you can see, the red is before. The red is before with nothing there. When it's in a yellow circle, I think I have what's, and it so much looks like a child, right?
And that changed the entire timeline of the case, because we all believe that she had died in the house before she was taken to Survey 19. Now, there are people on social media who seek an opportunity to make someone they don't know hurt. Just hurt, or just hurt more than they're already hurting. And all of those people saw a clean target when the Rzuceks made their feelings known.
You want to make a beautiful video of my daughter and my grandchildren, a memorial of them? I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Don't ever disrespect my daughter, because you do not know who she is. You do not know my son. You do not know them.
Now, many took the opportunity that they saw with the Rzuceks expressing their feelings as an opportunity to declare their First Amendment rights and dig in even deeper. And sometimes getting really in nasty online brawls with Frank and Frankie Jr. Now, again, I'm not going to show these clips of these disputes, because honestly, they aren't that hard to find. And I don't want to exploit or signal boost those situations. I want us to learn how not to get into that kind of a situation again, how not to exploit true crime families. Now, at one point, after the Rzuceks decide to team up with another big Watts creator to combat the conspiracy channels, Sandi Rzucek started a cooking channel, and through many videos, she walked us through some really delicious Italian cooking recipes. And every once in a while, she would, mention the names of her daughter and grandchildren, but she didn't talk about the case, and she was clearly trying to show that there was much more to life, and her life, and their lives in general, than raking her murdered daughter over the coals every day and getting paid for it. The battle between these conspiracy channels and the Rzuceks have birthed change.org petitions, threats of lawsuits on both sides. And in all honesty, a lot of this is still in very heated battle and some in litigation. And I don't even know truthfully where they stand. There's some litigation in the UK that's going on between the Rzuceks and a channel. So it, again, like I said, this is all still, even though we're probably out of the center of the vortex, we're still in that swirl about this situation, and I don't want to make it any worse. Now, suffice it to say, social media made the situation worse for Shanann's family, and I truly believe that social media stalled their freedom to grieve more naturally. Social media kept that wound wide open for a really long time, and at times sticking knives right into those open wounds, and it was really, really hard to watch. When the Watts family home was sold a few months ago, Frank Rzucek gave an interview and continued to express how damaging social media has been in the aftermath of a parent's worst nightmare 4 times over.
But in the nearly 4 years since the tragic murders, those who lived the nightmare that captivated the world say their heartache has only gotten worse, all because of YouTube and the conspiracy theorists who profit off of clicks.
Still very sad and upset. It's terrible what we have to go through with the social medias threatening us.
Some have suggested Frank paid for his family to be killed in order to claim insurance money, or that his wife participated in the crimes.
What did you know at 8 o'clock that Chris didn't know?
Others have even threatened their lives.
To hear these people continue to put us in the limelight and accuse us of doing this and being part of it is ridiculous. They're doing it for views. They're doing it for money, and YouTube is also gaining off of their views.
The Rzuceks have tried calling YouTube, writing them, and more.
Reporting these things and telling them that's going to cost us someone to go and commit suicide for this to stop.
So that gives you just a taste of what the Rzuceks have gone through and are going through because their daughter was murdered. I don't understand. I can't fathom it. It's too much to bear in some cases. Now let's switch to the Watts. The Watts are really complicated and difficult to understand, mostly because they never came onto social media and really talked about anything with their own mouths. They always used proxies, and in some cases, I believe they still do, use proxies to speak for them, channels. And since many of their proxies had bigger priorities than to put the Watts' needs in the situation first, it turned into a grift show. Okay? I'm just going to say it. It's a grift show. Now, we know for sure that the Watts family name has been used to execute countless scams on the community, and we know for sure that the Watts themselves have come out and declared that they do not want their names used in that way anymore. And what else do we know? We also know that Algo Man was a big part of that as well. In one case, a woman who had, and again, I'm not going to say who this is, a lot of you are going to know, but I'm not going to promote this person's channel. It's still very much there. It's still very much abusing, in my opinion, abusing the right to have a channel, and I don't want to signal boost it. But this person created a character named Shazam to mock Shanann Watts through multiple videos using a corpse filter. And she was able to gain access to Ronnie and Cindy Watts after that and talk them into letting her create a nonprofit to help them get Chris out of prison. And she even said that they agreed to be on the board of directors of the nonprofit. By her own account, this woman convinced the Watts that she could launch this nonprofit and a companion website along with it and draw enough members and subscribers to support a $250,000 retainer for these specialized attorneys that she was able to find for them. What? Now, anyone with a background in the sales funnel and web conversions knows that it would be a miracle to do that, unless you were selling $50,000 memberships to a bunch of billionaires. All right? Sadly, that's not the case. And she wasn't able to raise that kind of money. But the idea that a nonprofit was being stood up to help Chris Watts get out of prison created an entirely new dust-up of chaos, with all of the Watts creators debating whether this could or shouldn't happen, whether the nonprofit was legitimate or not, and this controversy raged on for months, along with too many other scandals and controversies to count, including this particular person. All right. So this so-called nonprofit was launched in March of 2021, and as of July 2022, the Watts have made it publicly known that they want no association with this nonprofit whatsoever. They further claimed that their digital signatures were forged without their consent. Honestly, it's not up to me to decide whether there's fraud, and if there was, whether there are legal consequences to those actions. But I can give my opinion, and my opinion is that if it's true that this person went as far as to forge digital signatures of the Watts, there's no recovering from that level of exploitation. I want to stop here and qualify something. I'm reporting this particular story from the Watts' point of view, all right? Based on statements that they've released publicly on YouTube, again, through proxies. And I'm more than confident that the creator I'm speaking about has a very different perspective. So if you're interested in her perspective, send me an email and I'll send you the name of the person, and then you can go and you can look at their channel yourselves. But I'm not going to signal boost her here. Now, having said all of that, it is common knowledge now that the Watts sent this creator a letter demanding that they be removed from the nonprofit board of directors. And to date, they've not been removed from the publicly available documents. And it's unclear whether a new board has been appointed. And for that and many other reasons, there's a great deal of controversy surrounding whether this is a legitimate nonprofit to help families or if it's a fraud. And again, it's being investigated, not up to me to decide. In the meantime, that person is still actively operating a channel that is at the center of some of the biggest, most disturbing scandals on Watts Island, and I'll cover that in part 3. But let's get back to the other ways the Watts name has been exploited. As I mentioned before, it was very valuable currency to have a direct connection to Chris Watts or the Watts family on Watts Island. It was so valuable that multiple creators built their channels up to the tune of 100,000 subscribers on the currency that they had a direct source in the Watts family who was feeding them information about everything from the case itself to the strategy for getting Chris out of prison. One creator burst on the scene saying that she'd been in direct correspondence with Chris Watts and was able to convince many creators on Watts Island over a long period of time that she had some sort of insider knowledge about the case and about Chris. And this person became an integral part of a much bigger Watts channel, one that I was referring to, the first channel that I was referring to, that was going live about Watts every single day. She developed a connection with this channel, and they boosted her voice and her signal even louder. And she went on that channel for months with this implied connection until that much larger channel creator went live one day and showed very convincing evidence that this person had been lying the whole time. This all but ran her off of YouTube until December of last year, when it was first revealed that after going quiet for many months, she continued to impersonate Chris Watts in real life. She's currently married to a young woman she met only by virtue of the fact that she had a connection to Chris Watts, and only by virtue of the fact that she convinced this girl's mother that her daughter was going to be marrying Chris Watts. Did you get that? Well, let me just put that a different way. A YouTube creator catfished a woman she met on YouTube impersonating Chris Watts. During the course of this catfishing, the creator was given thousands of dollars under the guise of helping Chris Watts and her daughter get married. The catfishing creator is now married to this daughter of the woman she conned while being Chris Watts. You can't make this stuff up, you guys. Again, I'm not going to say this person's name. This battle is raging on right now. What I will do is I will link to a live stream on Alex Erickson's channel where you can see this discussed and talked through, and then you can do your own research and come up with your own conclusions. None of the facts of that situation about this Chris Watts impersonating is in dispute. My opinion might be about it may be in dispute, but the facts are this woman has admitted to impersonating Chris Watts, but says it was for a completely different reason than it was. She thinks it was totally okay for her to say that she was Chris Watts in order to do what she was trying to do. Now, again, it's not right for me or frankly for the YouTube streets to decide whether any laws were broken, whether there should be any punishment. That's for the authorities. But from a purely human perspective, it physically hurts me to know that there are people out there willing to use the name of a family annihilator in such an exploitative way. And that a woman would allow her daughter to marry a man like Chris Watts. That is effed up in my mind too. But don't forget, there had been a very, and this goes again to the faction of the Watts case, there was a very radical faction that believed that he was totally innocent and was trying to get him out of prison. And so this woman thought he was innocent. She was convinced that Mark Garagos had taken the case for Chris Watts, and that wasn't true either. It certainly looks bad on the mother, but at the same time, you don't know how much she was told, and she truly believed that Chris Watts was innocent and that he was actually getting out of prison And that's why they were creating these arrangements for her daughter to marry Chris Watts. It was all a fiction. And that to me is base exploitation. Now, an entirely different channel. Now we're into a completely different situation that I wouldn't necessarily call a scam, but I would call not the right thing to do, in my view. This large channel with a large Patreon following created a stir when they came out and claimed that the sister of Jamie Watts, Chris Watts, had given Chris Watts oxycodone before he murdered his wife and children. Now, the channel even claimed that they had reported this with proof to the FBI and that it was being actively investigated, and that was why they weren't able to show proof to the YouTube audience, is because, well, it's with the FBI and it's being investigated. We can't talk more about it, but we just thought we should let you know through our Patreon that this actually, we have proof that this happened. To this day, they have never shown this proof, and a year and a half after making the claim, it's still nowhere to be seen. We don't see any FBI. Now, in full disclosure, in one of my Watts videos, I talked about this, I started thinking through the scenarios of how could this happen? Could it happen? But I truly believe that these people had this proof and that there was an FBI investigation. And to this day, they still say that this is an FBI investigation. Now, how do you think Jamie Watts felt and the Watts family felt when that kind of an accusation was made? Well, I don't know, but I have heard through the grapevine that she was enraged by it and threatened legal action. I don't know for sure. But what I do know for sure is that it was an extremely cruel and unnecessary thing to do to a woman who had literally nothing to do with the deaths of Shanann and the girls. Now, eventually, after the discovery had been ripped to shreds, and after every conspiracy about the Watts case had been played out, content about the Watts case really died down. And now there are a few, channels left who really only sit there and talk about the case. And also another factor in that is that the families basically took themselves out of the foreground of social media. The Watts may still have proxies, but they don't use them as much to speak for them. And the Rzuceks have basically been very quiet lately, with a few spurts here and there. But where did this leave all the creators who had been getting such high views talking about Watts and any drama surrounding the Watts? They had a few choices for which direction to take with their channels. Some diversified into other true crime cases and stopped focusing only on the Watts. Some continue to focus exclusively on the Watts, like I said earlier. And they do this despite the knowledge of how it's affecting the families, and also despite the knowledge that they likely know they will never learn anything new. There's nothing that's going to change. There will never be the kind of closure they're looking for. We already have closure. He pled guilty. He's in jail. He's prepared to stay there for life. Case closed, right? But a good portion of these creators that started out covering Watts started talking only and exclusively about the true crime drama and about the drama surrounding the Watts creators. And that's how Watts Island came to have kind of a crappy reputation, because that's all it was. Watts Island was just a bunch of people going back and forth. And I participated in that for a little bit. And, if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't. So it's something that happens. And before anybody watching this gets caught up in that kind of scenario again, I hope you'll remember this and see that nothing super good came out of tearing apart the Watts case. All we're really getting is a bunch of escalation that's turning into lawsuits and could very easily turn into a much more dire situation in a split second. So that's what I'm doing here, is to try to point this stuff out. And the reason why the atmosphere on Watts Island is like this is because, again, in every group that's created online, there is a subgroup that's willing to go well below the belt. These people are willing to take somebody's knees out. It's the equivalent of somebody taking someone's knees out, but online. I mean, they will do as much as they possibly can to discredit another creator, retaliate on another creator, and they'll all do it under the guise of, I'm justified in doing this, I should be able to do this, but then crying about the fact that it's being done to them. And it's just this constant ping pong back and forth. And, you know, and the name calling and the ad hominem and the body shaming and one of the things that bothers me the most is the addiction and mental health shaming. For obvious reason, I'm a recovering addict and I have a mental illness. But I would say that a very sizable percentage of people on Watts Island and on YouTube are addicts and have mental illness. And every time they hear another creator tearing somebody down for some mental illness or addiction, that hits them in some kind of way. And around and around and around we go. Now, as things stand today, 2 of the creators I talked about are in a very ugly court battle with each other that seems to have no end, because neither of them will admit defeat. Even though there's a legitimate protection order over one person, she's not going to stop. And at this point, I can count something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 protection orders that have been put out against people, and it hasn't stopped them from, in their minds, exercising their First Amendment rights. Neither of the sides that I just talked about seem interested in keeping the battle off of YouTube, and Algoman really likes that, and YouTube as a company takes no interest in enforcing its community guidelines in terms of service for smaller channels. Now, another channel I talked about has deleted all but one video, claiming to be stepping away from YouTube. This would be the second time she's stepping away from YouTube after revelations that she was impersonating Chris Watts. This is 2 waves of impersonating Chris Watts. The content on her channel is deleted now, except for one video, but she could come back at any time. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still good creators out there who have good intentions, but the ones with the most greedy intentions literally sit around and drag other creators all day, and since YouTube doesn't enforce their own guidelines, the bad guys win. Because the bad guys are willing to lie, they're willing to bully, they're willing to quiet people into silence. And that's essentially what they've done with the Watts and the Rzuceks. But the ensuing creator-on-creator drama that came out of Watts Island, that's what we'll talk about in part 3. Because since some creators have no limits to their behavior, some of these battles have been as ugly as I've ever seen in my entire life, both online and offline. That's it for part 2. Please join me for part 3 of this series, where we talk about all of the stuff that I told you about before, the PPOs, the lawsuits, all that crap. Stay tuned. And in the meantime, remember, don't make things worse on other people. You have no idea what's going on in their real lives. You have no idea if their family was just annihilated by a murderer. Be kind. Be kind to people. Peace out.